the So I'm Adopted podcast, where we talk everything adoption. This journey is not one we take alone. Together we grapple with raw emotions that surface from adoption stories. We want you to be comfortable enough to heal. So sit back and go with us on this journey as we dive deep into adoption.
We wanted to create a space for adoption truth. We have a common bond of being adopted. Our stories are very, very different. We wanted to have our conversations and allow other people to hear our conversations and also be able to share theirs as well.
This podcast is where we will hear our adoption stories from other adoptees, adoptive parents, and biological families. We will also have input from licensed professionals such as psychologists, social workers, to get a deeper understanding of this adoption journey. Hopefully, these stories and perspectives will give hope and understanding and courage to those who are adopted or who are thinking about, being adopted. Along with the journey of acceptance, reconciliation, and maintenance of being adopted. Those are going to be some of the anchors that we will highlight each time we come on this podcast.
Again, we want to thank you for taking some time and invest with us at So I'm Adopted. This journey has been so fulfilling since we started this podcast. And what has happened is it's kind of taken a different turn from what we initially thought. Initially, our focus was just on adoption, but what we have identified is that it works with non-traditional relationships.
Yes.
And there are so many different layers. And we've had people that have reached out that want to share their stories. We've had people that want to be resources. And today we have somebody at the table with us that is going to be a resource and give a wealth of information. So Lisa, go ahead and jump in. Let's go.
Yes. So today our guest is a social worker for the city of Hampton in Virginia. She has been training foster parents for over 20 years. She holds a bachelor's degree of arts in social work from Christopher Newport University and a master's of arts degree in education and training from the University of Phoenix. She's also the CEO and professional trainer of Training Solutions, LLC, as well as an author of No Excuses. So let's please welcome Mrs. Allison Davidson.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming. Yes. So, like we mentioned, that Allison works with fostering to adoption.
That is correct. Right? Foster to adopt.
Because there's two different ways. It's either you go straight to adoption or fostering to adoption. So her expertise is in the fostering to adoption, but we'll definitely talk on both sides of it.
I'm about to say, because I don't even know the difference in some of the language that's being used, foster care and then adopt. And so just educate us in just some basic language of what you do.
Well, definitely what I do, I train our foster parents to become foster adoptive parents. I recruit them and train them because in the city of Hampton, we have a need. We have about 86 kids in foster care. And so with that said, we're always needing and recruiting families. And so when you said something very unique, when you said foster to adopt, that is different for a lot of people. What that looks like is you get to foster a child for a while before you're able to adopt them. At least 6 months before you can really legally adopt them if they become available for adoption. So the process is different. A lot of people don't really think about that as an opportunity to adopt children, but you can foster to adopt a child in the state of Virginia.
So what's the difference between the straight adoption, private adoption versus a foster? What's the big differences between the two?
Well, the first thing is the big difference is money financially. There are different types of adoption. Okay, so you have your domestic adoption and you have your international adoption. And then you can do foster to adopt. The more economical way is foster to adopt. Obviously, international adoption is probably your most expensive way to adopt. You're going to be traveling, you're going to be spending a lot of money going out of the country. And so there's different fees associated with that. When you talk about domestic adoption, a lot of people can choose private or They can with an agency, or they can go to a lawyer and have the lawyer write up the adoption paperwork and pay that way. But still, those fees can be anywhere from $1,000 to $50,000 to go adoption way, straight up adoption. If you choose, though, to go foster to adopt, the state of Virginia will help you out there because there is no cost associated with foster to adopt.
Whoa, 30-second timeout. So domestic adoption can cost anywhere from $1,000 to $50,000.
Domestic and international.
But if you do the foster to adopt, there's no cost.
There's no cost.
Wow. I got a question. Isn't black market an option too? I
know nothing about black market.
I'm not even gonna say anything, Lisa. I'm gonna leave that one alone.
Hey, I'm sticking to that.
So I guess the first question would be, are there any disqualifiers where someone would not be able to go through that process of foster to adopt?
There are several. One of the things that stand out is background checks. We do background checks. Sometimes individuals might have some type of been on a sexual offender registry. If that's the case, that would disqualify them.
Is there a certain amount of time, or is it just automatic disqualify?
Disqualify.
So
when you look at background checks, and also you have to look at if there is any domestic violence in their past, we look at all of those things.
Do they also look at the type of nucleus family as well?
That's not a disqualifying. You can be single, you can be married, and you can be same-sex couples. It doesn't matter.
What about divorce? Is that frowned upon?
Oh, no. Long as you have your divorce and your divorce is final, and you just have to give us a copy of your divorce decree. And we talk to people about this all the time. When they call us to foster to adopt, we do a pre-screening. And I'll talk to you probably a little bit later about it, but we do a pre-screening, and that is wonderful because it allows them to ask questions to us. And then we're able to give them that information that they need to see if they're a good fit. Some people eliminate themselves, and sometimes we let them know that they might not be able to move forward because of some things they need to get straight. Some families maybe are in job situations where they are not employed and don't have income. That could be an issue in terms of getting approved as a foster parent. You have to show that you have income.
So why would someone that is not employed want to be a foster parent? Because of the money that they receive for the child?
Lisa, good question. Good question. I'm not sure for certain what each person's reason, but sometimes that could be a reason. Some people might think is lucrative, that they're looking for a job. And so becoming a foster parent is further from that. It's not a job. You're going to be a parent to our kids, and a lot of times you might spend more money than you might receive. We do pay a maintenance, and a maintenance is a reimbursement. It's not like we pay them. We just give them a reimbursement because like I know, it costs money to take care of these babies. Right? It costs money. And so we reimburse them for caring for the kids in foster care.
I do know that there's a narrative, and back when I first started teaching, it was a big boom of group homes because people were aware that you did get funding back. And again, the boom took place, and as a result, they changed the regulations, and then they started doing more screening, doing more coming out checking. So I would imagine that's probably where some of that narrative came from, that people believe, oh, if I'm a foster parent, I'm going to get some type of money, or if I adopt, I'm going to get some type of funding back. So I guess, how do you, if somebody does come to you with that type of narrative and conversation, what is the response?
Well, what we try to do is educate them. We try to tell them about our program, and we let them know that up front, you might have to put out some money just to make sure your house is ready. You have to have a bed for a child. They don't have to have their own room, but they have to have their own bed. So there are some things they might have to prepare their house for, and that is their cost, because they are interested in becoming a foster parent, but they also have to have a suitable home for that child.
When you do the screenings and interview, do you speak to the neighbors? And the reason I'm asking, one of the things that my family expressed to me when they were going through the process of adopting me that the case manager went to multiple houses in the neighborhood asking about what type of people they were. Were they fighting? Were they out drinking? All types of questions. So what type of, I guess, external screenings are there that you all take?
Well, we do what we call reference checks.
Okay.
And so the families provide those to us, though.
Oh, okay.
So we don't go door to door. And that, which brings me to a question. Were you adopted through foster care or not?
No.
Okay.
Catholic Family Services.
Okay. So yours was a private agency that was utilized. And sometimes with private agencies, they can go even over and beyond the regular standard requirements.
So is there a standard set by Virginia, and forgive me for my ignorance because I don't know, or is there just an adoption standard that is the same for all states?
Well, no, it's not the same for all states.
Okay.
Similar, but not the same. There could be some variations. But yes, the state of Virginia has a set of requirements, and those requirements have to be met. Things like background checks that we talked about, things like medical, a person has to have a physical and things of that nature. Each person in the household that is 18 or older, we have to run background checks on them as well. So say if you have a son in your home and that son had some type of background check that came back that makes them a disqualifying, right? They might have done something that, with drugs or some type of felony charge. Right. Possession with an arm, robbery or something. And so this could make them being disqualified because they live in a household.
So if that scenario were to take place and then they were to say, well, they're about to move out, do they have to start the whole process over? Or because they were disqualified by a family member living in the house, are they able to, how does that impact it?
Well, it really can impact them to not be approved at that time.
Okay.
And so what happens if their situation changes, they can always come back to be reassessed.
Good. What would you say is the success rate of the fostering to adopt? Those who start that fostering process where they take the child in, and then the success rate of a full adoption taking place, or and I hate to say it this way, but there's no, we're not going to continue. We're going to stop this process.
Well, I don't have the stats on that right in my head today, but I can tell you this. I can tell you that when a person starts the process, it's a mutual understanding where they can select out, or we can select them out, or we can select them in. And so through the process, sometimes people select themselves out. They discover that they cannot make that commitment.
Yeah.
Well, I did do a little bit of studying.
Oh, good.
And what I did discover as far as foster children, and this is for the United States, not specifically for Virginia, but for the United States Department of Health and Human Services. On any given day, over 391,000 children are living in the U.S. foster care system, and the number continues to rise. Over 113,000 of these children are eligible for adoption, and they will wait an average almost 3 years for an adoptive family.
Wow.
53% of the children and youth who left foster care were reunited with their families or living with a relative. 25% were adopted.
Okay.
More than 48,000 youth in U.S. foster care lives in some type of a institution, such as a group home or other environments, instead of with a family. And in 2021, 53,500 children and youth were adopted. So 55% of them were adopted by their foster parents and 34% by a relative. And then 29% ended up aging out. And then the average of being fostered, adopted is 6 years old, based on the statistics for Human Services for the United States. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yes, currently, right now, the state of Virginia has over 700 kids waiting for adoption. We have about 5,240 kids in foster care. So there's a great need for foster parents. And so if anyone that is interested in adopting, this is a way to go. Now, I think some of the drawbacks is a lot of individuals like to adopt babies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's go there, right?
Right.
So when you think about it, when I receive calls from the city to, receive calls at Hampton, the city of Hampton, a lot of times families want babies. And so we are honest with them up front. We have babies sometimes, but a lot of our kids might be older. And so if they're willing to foster to adopt an older child, they might have an even greater chance to adopt. But we do have babies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was a baby.
I was a baby as well. And we do recognize that our stories are unique.
Yeah.
And it's just a small snapshot in the big pool of adoption. So I guess the other question, and I never thought about it until we just started this discussion. At what point, because I know you said you have some babies, but do you have older children that may start off with their parents or parent, and then they have to go into the adoption system at an older age? Or does it start when they're young and that's the only place that they can enter into that pool, so to speak?
Oh no, they can enter in at any time. Kids that come into foster care system come in different ways. Sometimes they come in because of abuse and neglect. And so when they come in through our CPS, Child Protective Services unit, we bring them in to place them into a foster home. And our goal is reunification. What that really means is we want to get them back home. Because just like you read, experts tells us that kids do want to go home. They want to go back to their families. And this is why we see a rise in a lot of kin families want to be a foster to adopt parent.
That makes sense. That definitely makes. And I know sometimes when, maybe the parents both die, and all of a sudden, one moment you're in a happy family, and then the next moment you're foster kids. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So
we have had those cases.
And then you don't have relatives who want to take you in, so you end up falling into that system.
And a lot of families might not even know their relative have a child that was placed in foster care. So this is a military area we live in, right? So we have people coming from all over. So sometimes when kids come into care, the first thing we do is a family finding. We try to find out, are there other family members that can take this child right away? We don't want them to stay in foster care.
Right.
But our goal is to return home to family for kinship. It could be grandma, it could be grandpa, a family member that could take the child. But if that can't happen, we move forward to adoption.
So
great.
So I know growing up, and I mentioned it when I spoke about my journey. Even though my brother and I were adopted, we also had foster kids in our house, right? And they would come in and out. Sometimes they'll go back to their family, their parent or whatever, or they'll come back to us. So they were never always constant.
Right.
So I guess once their parent was back on their feet or whatever the situation, then they'll leave, but then they'll come back and then they'll leave. So they were never always there all the time.
Right.
But we always had a social worker who came, who visited quite often. Is that something that you do as well?
Excellent point. Yes, we do that. We have to visit our kids every 30 days. And so our foster care unit actually go and make the appointments, and they go see the children in their environment. They can also see them in school. And so that's to make sure everything is going well, just checking on the child, just to make sure that they are healthy. The parents, to see if the foster parents have any questions. And I do my visits because I am a trainer, right? And I go to the homes and I make sure the parents are doing what they're supposed to do. And I look at the safety of the home, the environment. So that's my part in it. The foster care workers worry about the children place. I worry about the parents to make sure if there's any needs that need to be taken care of, that I address those needs.
Gotcha. So I have so many questions. The first one, I want to go back, and we talked about you do the kinship where you try and find if they do have family members.
Mhm.
So let's say that there's a scenario where a family has started the foster to adopt, and then you do the find, and you find that there are family members. Who gets precedence with regards to where that child may go? Does it go directly to the family because family overrides, or do you do an assessment between the two different families to see who's the best fit for the child?
Well, we definitely do an assessment.
Okay.
So, say if you have family from each side, the father and the mother side decides to show up and interested. Well, we have to do a home study. We have to do an assessment of each family that is interested. And then that will help us to determine the best fit for that child.
Okay.
Also, what type of relationship did they have with that child prior to the child coming to foster?
That's good.
That's very important because older kids will have an opinion about where they want to go.
Yes, they will.
And do you guys take that into consideration?
Oh, most definitely,
Okay.
especially when they're 14 or older.
Okay.
And also when kids are 14 and older in foster care, they can decide if they want to adopt.
Really?
They can decide if they want to be adopted.
So if they say, you know what, I don't want to be adopted, I don't want to go down that route because of the trauma I've experienced, what does their journey look like?
Their journey looks like they will stay into a foster home that has them for permanency. And when a lot of them age out at 18 or 21, they can stay into 21 if they're doing everything they're supposed to do. And they have decided that, yes, I want to go to school. I want to do something to better myself because let's face it, when kids are 18, oftentimes they're not ready for the real world.
This is true.
Yeah.
I chuckle. I got an 18-year-old at home right now. We're trying to let her know this is something that you have to get prepared for. There's no blueprint that works for every single person. Some of it is I can take you right there, but some of it is you're going to have to learn. So the other question I have, and again, I have a sped hat, so I have to ask, is there a heightened population of individuals with disabilities that are in the pool for adoption?
Oh, yes. But just before I answer that question, I would like to pivot back to the fact that that program is called Fostering Futures when they stay until 18, to 21. Yes, we have kids, all types of kids. So yes, kids come in with disabilities. We have kids been abused to the point where like a shaken baby syndrome. And because of that, they incur injuries. One child I can think of incurred some injuries that was legally blind because of being shaken. So things happen to kids, but also kids come in with their developmental delays, right? And so we have a lot of kids that have mental health challenges as well, dual diagnosis. And so depression is really big. And so when kids come in, they are really looked at and talked to see if they can benefit through a therapist. And so we making sure that the trauma that they have experienced, that we are working with them to deal with some of those traumas.
So y'all partner with different agencies, or do you have a therapist on site?
We actually partner with service providers that actually work with our kids. And our families can actually select from a team of service providers to work with.
So what type of training do you offer the individuals who may say, I'm willing to take a individual that has special needs? What type of trainings are available for them?
Well, first of all, the first training we take them through is a program called Pride. And this program with Pride is wonderful because it takes them through 5 weeks of training, 3 hours each night. So about 5 weeks, one day a week for 5 weeks. And in this training, we talk about developmental delays. We talk about trauma. We talk about diversity. And I know we'll get there. But we talk about all of those needs that a child might have when they come in foster care. Because even though a parent might have had a biological child, they haven't had a child in foster care. And that's the difference.
That's one of the things that we talked about, how being adopted, you have a different lens. And sometimes you don't even understand why you look at things a certain way, but it is because of what you have experienced. So I can't imagine what that foster care hat would look like walking in that.
I'm glad you mentioned that because the story of a child in foster care looks different from a story from a child who's been adopted by one parent, right? And
Absolutely.
been with that parent the whole time. Many of our kids in foster care might have gone through more than one placement. And so, as they disrupt and went from one placement to another for whatever reason, and some of it could be caused by them, and some things are not. Some families move and change locations, and a child might have to move from their home. But that is trauma. That's very traumatic for a child. So, when you think about it, when they have been removed from their home, their biological family for whatever reason, right? Placed with a foster child, and then have to move again. And in some cases, more than once. So their story looks different from your story.
And in addition, I would say that there's some learned behaviors and learned expectations in that, because the mindset would be, well, they gave me away and then they gave me away. So now when they go into a new environment, that expectation or that bias is there of, well, how long before you give me away? That defense mechanism.
Exactly.
So that is, all of that would be the training, because if I'm excited about the fostering to adopt program and I'm here, but then I'm met with this child that has this wall up, and I don't
self-sabotage.
And I don't understand how to take those bricks away. It can be detrimental to not only me but that child, and then that cycle just repeats itself.
And often, sometimes our kids, when they come in your home, in a foster home, they don't want to unpack. They want to leave their things in a bag because you might tell me to leave any moment, and I'm ready to go. And so that mentality has to be changed through trust.
So do you all offer therapy for the child as they continue to go through this foster program?
Most definitely.
Okay. And then the other question was, with the 1 day a week training, is that done before the child enters their house, or is that done simultaneously once they're already in?
Great. Both questions are very important.
Okay.
We do training before they enter their home, and then we do training after they're in their home. There's a continuous training with our foster parents. And when you think about a person giving birth to their own child, they don't get a lot of training, right? You get the child, sometimes parents don't look into all of that, right? But with foster parents, they really get to have a lot of training before that child gets there.
That's great. I'm excited to hear that. So again, and I have a bias from the school system because that's my lens. What would you say, or how can I best put it? What impact does this process of being foster to adopted or just foster have on their education?
Well, definitely. Kids that are removed, we like to keep them in the same environment as far as the schools, the doctors, if we can, for continuity of care. And this helps keep them stable. Oftentimes when we do move them, it's because we want to do what's best for them. But as far as their peers, we try to keep the connection. If they have other siblings, groups, we have had families of 14 that came in foster care.
Oh, wow.
That's a large family, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes we can't put them in the same household, foster household. And so, but we still want to keep them connected, right? So we will make sure we have visitations, we have things set up so all the foster parents and the kids can still connect.
That's interesting because the kids that I grew up with, they were siblings.
Okay.
Even though they came in, it was a few of them that were individuals, but at least 2 or 3 of them were siblings. So.
And we do that. We try to keep them together at all costs. But when a sibling group, you can imagine a 14, that's quite a bit, right?
Yeah. Wow. I'm sure that's challenging.
Very challenging. And in fact, I should have mentioned, one part of my job is placements. I'm the placement locator. So not only do I train the parents to be foster parents to get approved as foster to adopt parents, I'll also find placements. So when CPS call, it could be any time, we in our unit take care of the placement of those kids. So we have to know our families quite well. We have to know information about them through their home studies to make sure that whatever child we place in a home, we call it first placement, last placement. So if they're not able to go home, maybe they can be adopted by their current foster parent.
So how do you, that's it. My question is, how do you determine if this family and this child will mesh? You know what I'm saying? How do you determine, okay, we're going to put this child with this family because of whatever?
Right. Well, we know there's no direct absolutes, right?
Right.
We can't just say that, but we can look at what are the interests of the foster parent when they came in. They have a home study completed. They wanted a boy, girl. They wanted the age group that they indicated, but they also talk about who they are, how their family's made up. They might have animals or they may not have animals. When children come in foster care, we find out what type of family they can come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
We also find out how many children in their family that are coming into foster care. So we look at, is this family interested in adopting or not? Because if it's a small child and the family, that their biological family had a lot of issues and they came into care through substance abuse or mental health, and families struggle with trying to get their stuff together, we want to make sure whatever family we put this baby with is interested in adoption.
Does race play a part?
Well, it certainly allow us to consider that. It's one factor that we do consider. It's not it. A black family doesn't have to adopt a black child, just like a white family doesn't have to adopt a white child. We can mix kids in different environments racially, but we also look at the training that we take them through. And we look at their home study and what they're interested in. Families often tell us they don't care or they do want a child to look like them.
Gotcha.
And so when we hear that, we take that in consideration. So we want kids comfortable when we place them in homes.
Makes sense.
Wow. There's so much.
And I want to add something there because it brings me to the fact that whatever household we put them in, we want that child represented. So it could be something in their environment. The foster parent might go to a mixed church. The foster parent might have doctors that is of different race. The child needs to see themselves in that environment. So many studies have shown that kids that are adopted by a different race, when they are not shown themselves, they grow up in an environment and they begin to almost resent the fact that they didn't see themselves.
Yeah.
And they begin to have low self-esteem, to begin to question their identity. So we don't want that to happen. We want families that are interested in adopting kids of different races. They are willing to expose those kids to those different environments that looks like them.
This is side note, but it's in line with what you just said. Angelina Jolie, her daughter, obviously she adopted her from Ethiopia,
Okay.
I think.
International
adoption. And she's so in tuned into her children that her daughter goes to Spelman.
Wonderful.
And she's making sure she's integrated into that, and that was, I believe that obviously that was her choice to go to a historical Black school, and she's supporting her because you see it on social media. She's there at the school with her and everything, and she gave her that space for her to do that, to see people that look like her. I thought that was phenomenal.
Excellent example. It's so important that kids see themselves.
So I want to pivot and ask a question. What is the difference between an open adoption and a closed adoption?
I'm glad you asked that question because so many people think in Virginia we have an open adoption. We actually don't. In the state of Virginia, it's a closed adoption. Everything is closed adoption. But what does that look like? Well, it looks like you will have a closed adoption, but adopted parents and bio parents can have an agreement. And their agreement could mean it could have some open agreement situations where it could be, maybe pictures. It could be letters, could be sent. But that is between the two parties. But the state of Virginia does not recognize open adoptions. It only recognizes closed adoptions.
So what is a closed adoption and what's an open adoption?
Well, closed adoption obviously is the things about the birth family
Okay.
and the adopted family is kept confidential until that child get of age. And so of age in Virginia looks different than it did years ago. Years ago, you know, you had to be 18, then they moved it up to 21, then they kept moving it up. And they did that because of the fact that when kids got a certain age, they wasn't really ready to talk to that family, to get that information, because maybe there was that rejection and they wasn't ready for that. So they look at all of that. And so in the state of Virginia, kids have to be older now to get that information. I don't know if it's 22 or 25 now, but I will check for you.
Okay.
So, but could they get, as an adult over 21, could they get non-identifiable information? I know in my situation, in the state of New Jersey, they were all closed adoptions. So even as an adoptee adult, I still couldn't get, my original birth certificate unless my actual biological mother requested it or my adoptive parents requested it. But as an adult adoptee, I still didn't have that right to get it.
Good point. So in the state of Virginia, in fact, I work in my unit, we have adoption worker. And so he does this all the time. So what happens is when a person has been adopted and want to know information about their parents, they will contact the state. And whatever city the adoption took place, then they will contact that agency. In the city of Hampton, it is my unit that helps with that. So we have a person that actually goes, do the search, finds the parent if they're alive or not. Sometimes, unfortunately, they're not. And so he will have to contact the parent to ask the parent, the bio parent, do you want to hear from the child? Can we?
Yeah, that's what we're
do you want to talk to them? If they say no, they have to honor that.
Yeah.
And they cannot disclose any information. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's how we do it in the state of Virginia.
Okay. Yeah, we can, in New Jersey.
Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, his is. I could get non-identifiable information. Now, just to preface it, that the laws have changed in New Jersey since then, and now I requested my actual original birth certificate. So it have changed since the time I found out that I was adopted. But all I could get from the state was non-identifiable information, and then what they did was reach out to my birth mother to say, and they reached out to my birth mother and any siblings that's older than me to let them know that I'm looking for them, and if, were they interested in meeting me? And that's how that process works. But any child underneath me that's younger than me, they're not contacted. Only what took place prior to me coming, those are the people who was contacted. So that's how my story happened when I met my biological family.
So mine was a little different. The adoption agency was actually on Aberdeen in Hampton.
Okay, yeah.
But it was closed. So I had to call up to Richmond and say I was adopted at this agency and I'm trying to start the process. And then they assigned a case manager. And then they had a file that was about this thick. And the case manager said she had never seen a file that thick, because normally you don't have that many notes and things. I mean, it was weekly visits and information was provided about the community.
Wonderful.
And
they did a good job.
They did a good job. Yeah, yes, they did. And it was very, like when I got it, I felt like I had like this bright light in my hand because I'm learning about myself. So it definitely was a very emotional and empowering moment just to have this information, even though it was the non-identifying information, but just to be able to read some of your story. So I can only imagine being in the foster care, if you don't know your story and where you come from, you're always asking, you're always trying to figure out, because I always knew that my birth family was, I was adopted from this area. So going to Hampton, I'm walking around looking to see if I look like anybody,
Right.
or, maybe that's somebody. And then you start conversations and you
Yeah.
drop hints. But, so my hat goes off to you for what you do, because
Thank
it's
you.
such a pivotal role on both ends, because I'm sure that as that social worker in my case was taking notes, she had no clue that 30, 40 years later, it would have the impact that it did.
Yeah.
So just
Thank you so much.
kudos to you on
Yeah,
that. That's huge.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned several things. You talked about the fact that that information was so important to you. Kids in foster care, when we do receive them in through CPS and we get them in foster care, whatever we know about the child, their birth family, we share that information prior to adoption. So if families that are foster parents are wanting to adopt a child in foster care, as we know the information about that child prior to them coming to care about their birth family, we share that with with the adoptive parent.
So here's a question. In your training or in your safeguarding this whole journey, do you encourage the family to tell about the biological family information, or do you leave it to the discretion of the adoptive or foster family?
Right. That's an excellent question. Most of the time, it's so important to share information age appropriate.
Okay.
And that's what we like to tell them because, a 4 or 5-year-old can't handle certain things or they might not understand. And so when you talk about some of the dependency, some of the things that happen to them, drug situation, abuse, sexual abuse, different things, it has to be age appropriate.
Got it. Wow.
So that would be the adoptive family decision as to the age and when that occurred.
Okay. So I do have another question. What is an entrustment?
Good question. What happens is done through the courts. A family can decide that they want to entrust their child into a family. And they may or may not know that family, but they usually know the family. And they will go to court and they can sign a document that they will use this family and trust that they will be their parent and take care of them. And so they have to sign their rights away, pretty much.
Okay. So, because I've heard of giving up parental rights. So is that basically an extension of that, or different scenario?
Yes, pretty much, but it could be a little different because we do have families that try to give up their parental rights for different reasons. Yeah. So that looks different.
Okay.
That's a whole nother
another podcast.
Another podcast.
It's a whole nother one. Wow. So in Virginia, you said in Virginia, all adoptions are closed.
Yes, all adoptions are closed adoptions. And like I said, there are cases where there's a document, I can't think of the name of it, but it's like an agreement that can be done between the birth family and adoptive parent. An adoptive parent has to agree to this, right? Because they're the adopting one, right? So they have to agree to allow this relationship to continue. There are some pros and cons to that. Okay, let's talk about that. You want to talk about that?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Talk about that.
So a pro would be it can answer some of the adopted person's question, where I'm from, like you mentioned.
Right.
It's a link with their heritage, who they are, their ancestries, all of that. Another pro could be I have a wider group of family members now that I can pull from. Or they have access to their medical information. Wow,
that's important.
That's important.
Very.
And there's no need to search. I know who you are.
Yeah.
So that's a pro to that open type of adoption, right? But a con looks differently, right? Possible boundary issues. Trying to set those boundaries. And, I'm the adoptive parent. I'm the parent now. Possible unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe the child has the birth family. Things don't look like they thought they should look.
Yeah.
Conflict in values could be another one. Okay? The adoptive family have one value, the birth family have another value. And those values drive what we do.
Yeah.
Okay?
Wow.
Yeah.
So I just kind of want to share the difference. And, there's pros and cons.
So, in listening, those are a lot of the things that we brought up in sharing our stories.
Mm-hmm.
So the catalyst for me finding out my information was when my wife and I went to her first prenatal appointment, and the doctor gave us these forms and said, I need you to fill out your health history of your family. And my wife's just, and I'm sitting there like, I don't know what to say. Mm-hmm. And she saw the hurt in my face, and that's what started that journey. So something as simple as health history is so empowering.
Yes.
And a lot of people take it for granted because it's just their normalcy. But those who have a non-traditional journey in relationships and in life, we grasp for certain straws because we don't have, because we're denied that basic information. Yeah. So it's just so empowering.
I think so too. That was really good.
For me, it's different because I didn't know I was adopted until I was much older. I was in my late 30s. So, my adoptive mom had a lot of medical complications. She had a bad heart. She was on dialysis and things of that nature. So I'm thinking I may have those same type of illnesses because I didn't know. So I'm like, oh, I don't want, so I'm trying to prevent all of that based off of her medical situation and my dad's medical situation, but that's really could not be my story. You know what I'm saying? But I didn't know that at the time. Right. So to me, the disadvantage for me was not knowing what my true medical history was. But, I was able to at least obtain some of that once I found out who my biological mother was.
I'm glad you mentioned about how not knowing can really affect you. A lot of kids in foster care, when they don't know their story, they begin to make them up.
Oh, yeah.
Because they want to have a story.
You got to have a story.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they create ballooned stories in that.
Yeah.
So I have another question. I told you I got lots of questions.
Hey.
So, and you may not know the stats, but I would be curious to just get your opinion on this. What would you say is the likelihood of individuals going through foster care becoming a foster parent themselves?
Well, wow, it's a small percentage. Okay. I don't think it's a huge one from my experience. Right. But they do want to become foster parents, and they want to help those who can. Right. Some it's too hurtful, their memories, and it's a trigger for them, and so they choose to not do that. But I have quite a few individuals who was in foster care, and they are foster parents. However, they still have to deal with those triggers because we still have to address that. Right. And we do that through a number of ways. One way is through training. Okay. As we hear it, we talk about it and address it. Gotcha. When we do the home studies and it comes out, we ask them, how are you dealing with that? And so we ask those questions. It's important.
That's awesome. I was speaking with an individual who was adopted, and they expressed that they would never be married. They would never have kids. And part of it, I guess, is that trauma and those triggers and things of that nature. When my wife and I first got together, she was under the impression that she couldn't have kids. And my mindset was, well, I'm adopted, so it doesn't bother me. Right. That was just my mindset. So I'm just, always curious to know what others who have, like I said, the non-traditional journey, what their mindset is. And I guess it would have to do with the trauma that you experienced and then what your walk actually was. Because that shapes your lens on that.
And the help that you receive, resiliency, a lot of kids in foster care have a lot of resiliency. And so no two children are alike, right? So they can have the same parents, grew up in the same environment, same experiences, and be different how they deal with those things. Right. And we see that in foster care. We see kids come in through our program and they come through, have a foster parent. And one work out and go off to college and do well, and others may drop out and decide to go in the juvenile justice system.
What's the juvenile justice system?
They get into trouble with the community.
She made it sound so fancy.
And we kind of upstate. They do further things.
Take take an iron
falls in
vacation.
these-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, what program is that?
So you mentioned something earlier about a parental placement.
Right.
So can you just give a little more information on, what that looks like and
Right.
some of the experiences of why that takes place? Because we talked earlier about, if parents are deceased, got it, boom. But then at any point, because you said they can be in this pool, so to speak, until they're age 21.
Well, 18 first.
18.
And
Okay.
if they are in a program like college or doing independent living, they can stay into our Fostering Futures program.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So up until the child is 18, there's an opportunity for a parental placement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So would that be if a parent is, let's say that they become sick and they know, you know what, I'm not going to be able to care for my child and I don't have any family members, so I want to start them in this process now. Would that be an option?
Well, what normally happens is we have a program, sort of like a preventive program.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a parent, and we have had parents that had some health issues, and in particular, one particular situation, I can mention that the parent had to have surgery.
Okay.
And it was going to be a prolonged illness for a while. So that child didn't have any family members to care for them. And so they came into fostering like a respite program for a couple of weeks while mom got herself together, and we extended it because she still needed to recover. But then he didn't come into foster care, but we have programs like respite that helps the birth families.
Okay.
Because I wanted to mention that, and this is something we hadn't really talked about. I mentioned about reunification, right?
Mm-hmm.
How we want kids to go back, even though we are prepared for permanency. That means moving towards adoption. But what do we do with the birth families? We work with them. We try to put them into the into different programs if we can that will help meet their needs, so it will better themselves. It could be a substance abuse program. It could be parenting, a capacity test to make sure if we have any concerns that they're getting the training and everything that they need to become better parents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's court ordered and sometimes it's not.
Gotcha.
When it's court ordered, that means if they don't do X, Y, and Z, they're not going to get that child back.
That's right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. How often is it that a parent, it's not court ordered and they're like, and they really want what it?
Right. Usually those are the kids that are not in foster care. They're in respite programs.
Okay.
But the ones that are in foster care, what we do is there's a service plan, and the birth families have to follow the service plan in order to get their child back. The state of Virginia also look at timing, right? So kids, we don't want them in foster care forever. They're growing up every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that happens, there's on a time limit, right? So we're looking at 14, 15 months, about 18 months. We want kids in but return to their family in a short period of time. We don't want them to grow up in foster care. Many years ago, that used to happen. Kids grew up and stayed in foster care, aged out, and they often did not get adopted. And so now we're looking at permanency. What that looks like, permanency is adoption. It looks at who can we place this child with for permanency? Because once you're adopted, you're still connected with your family.
That's right.
Family is family forever.
That's right. So when you go back to speaking about the training, do you create group training for multiple families that are in the foster, or is it in their house, just them? Do you create a community?
Yes, we create a community, and sort of like a support group too,
right?
Because they can help one another, they can pull from one another experiences. But yes, we do monthly training at the City of Hampton for our foster parents. And so what we try to do, they have to do 10 hours. Each foster parent has to do 10 hours a year, and they get recertified every 3 years. And
so they get certified in foster parenting, or
to be a foster parent. It's a license through the state of Virginia that they are receiving. And so in order to maintain that license, there are certain training requirements. 10 hours a year per parent. And then every 3 years, a recertification.
So talk to me about, your journey of how you got into this field. What if somebody's watching and they say, you know what, I have a heart for trying to manage and place and get people where they need to be. What would be the journey to get to your position?
Wow, good question. I think it's definitely a journey of knowing that you want to work in the human services field.
Okay.
In that, it's so many different areas to work in. My journey took a while. I was a teacher first. I taught in the public school system.
Okay.
And so I started as a teacher assistant because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Mm.
So I decided to do that for a while and decided to go back to school. When I went back to school, I discovered while I was going that I think I want to be a social worker. So I went to Christopher Newport, and while I was there, I discovered that I enjoy the study of people. And so as I went there, my journey kind of took on different forms. I went and worked with TRICARE.
Okay.
You know, you TRICARE military, right?
Right.
And so I became a sort of like a trainer teacher there. And so I was teaching and training every job that I was in. And so as a social work, when I landed into social work, because I got a degree in social work, to be a social worker, I realized that I really didn't like case management though. There was aspects of the job I liked and aspects of the job I didn't. What my gift is to train. And so as a trainer, I fit in perfectly to train foster parents because there was the aspect of teaching, an aspect of working with families. So it was a good fit for me.
Wow.
So I think I would tell a person that they have to go through the journey of knowing what they really want to do.
Okay.
And they might not find that out until they actually start doing it.
Right.
One year, I'll never forget this, I was working a job as a trainer for Lutheran Family Services. And as a trainer, my mother was a foster parent prior to me getting the job.
Wow.
When I got the job and I trained my first class there, my mother looked up and she said, "That's your calling." And so I think as a trainer, as a social worker, because I enjoy what I do, it doesn't seem like work, you know?
Yeah, you're talking my jam, training. That's what I do. I love to help people have that light bulb moment. And then, of course, I have a passion for this as well. So just like you said, once you find out your why, the sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit.
So is there a educational process or direction that one would need to go in order to go into this field?
Definitely human services, anything in that area, social work, human services, and psychology, but really social work, human services.
Okay.
That will give you the foundation that you need.
Okay.
Because even if you have a degree, but it's not in social work, the fundamental basics of social work kind of give you the platform to kind of work with families, right? And so you don't have to learn on a job training, you learn through school because of all the information that was given to you. So I would let them know they have to get a bachelor's degree in order to do what I do.
Okay.
You don't have to have a master's, even though I have a master's in education and training.
Okay.
But I didn't have to have that to do my job.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. Light bulbs going off. I like that. So, and how long have you been in the field?
Well, she mentioned 20 years, but now it's been over 20 years. It's been over 25 years. I've been doing this a while.
Okay.
Yes, different aspects of it, but working with foster parents.
Okay. What would you say has been your greatest reward in your 25 years?
Wow, good question. I think this is really why I came today. It's really because I've seen the adoption process work. I have seen foster parents, foster kids, and adopt kids, and the kids receive the permanency. That is the reward. And it's such a fulfilling reward. I have had families that called me back and said, "We adopted," and I hear about it all along the process. But once it's done, I'm so happy for them. Because let me mention this that I didn't talk about. The journey to foster to adopt is a difficult one because you have to guard your heart. Some kids are reunited back with their families. So if you have a baby and you want the baby to adopt, that baby may or may not be your favorite child. Wow. So that's something that I want everyone to know. Guard your heart and understand it's a journey. Adoption is a journey. Whichever way you go, domestic, international, or just foster to adopt,
Right.
it's a journey. It's not going to be overnight, it's a process. Some adoptions can take from 6 months to well over almost 2 years.
Mm.
Now, do you have any, I guess, from one of your children that you place to their success, a success story of once they were adopted and then they graduate college or anything of that nature that you
Oh,
could share?
um, I don't know about sharing each. I can share this. And let me
Okay.
just say this. Yes, to that answer. We have a lot of kids come back and they like to share their stories.
Mhm.
Not all are success stories. Some
Right,
of them
right.
come
Yep.
back because they had a connection with their worker, right?
Okay.
So they want to talk to their worker. They want to see their worker again.
Okay.
And so they would like to say, "Hey, I was adopted. So and so still working here. She was my social worker." So those are wonderful things that they come back and let us know that they're doing well.
Okay, good.
So yes.
Okay, good, good.
So if, let's say, somebody's watching today and they say, you know what, I want to start this process to
Mhm.
foster to adopt, what would be the first thing that they need to do?
Of course, I'm gonna tell them to call me in the city of Hampton.
Okay, all right.
So if you call me in the city of Hampton, I will be your contact.
Okay.
And so you will be calling me at 757-810-6429.
And we'll
The
put
city
that
of
on.
Hampton.
We'll definitely put that up there.
Yes.
When we post
And
this.
since we do have people that are not just in Virginia, what is the title that they would look for to search? Let's say that they're in New Jersey.
Mhm.
So what title would they look for, or they
Right.
just Google foster to adopt, or what would be
They
that
need to
starting
start.
point?
Good question. They need to start first with their, like for the state of Virginia. We have Richmond, our Virginia Department of Social Services.
Okay.
And so each state have a Department of Social Services for that state.
Got it.
And then each county and cities have different localities.
Okay.
And in that, they can call their local city Department of Social Services and ask for their foster adopt program.
Okay.
I want to be a foster parent.
Okay.
And then we'll take it from there.
Excellent. So since we are here, we're going to talk about connecting them with you.
Yeah.
So they call you, they say, I was inspired and I want to be a foster parent. What's the first thing that they have to do after they make contact with you?
They're going to do a pre-screening. And
Okay.
that means I'm going to ask them a series of questions.
Right there on the spot?
Right there on the spot.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask them, do they have time to talk to me? Because I have a series of questions, or would they like to call me back when they're at a place where they can talk? Because some people don't know the questions that I'm going to ask them.
Right.
And the questions are simple things, and some of them are very personal. Like personal things could be their income. I will ask them, do they work a job? Do they have reliable income? And can they give me an estimate about their annual income? What is it? Those things are important to do pre-screening. We do ask them how many siblings, like how many children do they have, if they're married or not married.
Mhm.
We do ask all of those questions. We ask, do they have a place to live? How many bedrooms? Where do they live? Where do they reside? They don't have to be in the city of Hampton, okay, to be a foster parent for Hampton's Social Services.
Okay.
So they could be Suffolk. They could be in Newport News. So they can be in different areas. But we try to make sure they understand, however far you are, you have to drive to Hampton for training.
Okay.
You have to bring the kids to the city of Hampton schools a lot of times, especially if we're trying to keep them connected for continuity of care, right?
Okay.
So we want to keep them with their service providers, so those things will be less traumatic when they move into when they come into foster care.
Do you guys work together? Do you partner together, like you and Hampton and Newport News or Suffolk?
Well, the way we partner together, I would say, is that training, for example. Someone could receive training for Newport News and contact Hampton to actually become a foster parent. We can still bring them in our program. We might still take them through some training, but at least we know they have a certification.
Gotcha.
Most of the time, we collaborate anyway. Especially, remember I mentioned that I'm a placement locator.
Yes.
Sometimes other localities need placements, and they will call Hampton and say, "Hey, we have a child. Do y'all have a home?"
Gotcha.
So we will collaborate that way as well.
Okay.
Got it. Wow.
But it's a process through that pre-screening, telling them about the training programs, how long the class is, to see if they're able to give me a commitment and what that commitment level is.
So right now, with the way that the world is going, with trauma being at the forefront of everybody's mindset, do you all do anything with regards to social emotional learning for the adults that are, like I said, in this journey and supporting the children?
Wow, good question. Most foster parents are part of our training, but they also could be part of a support group.
Okay.
So there are different support groups throughout the state of Virginia that they could be a part of. But at our locality, we don't really have a support group other than our normal training program.
Okay. And based on the needs, then you would outsource and do recommendations and things of that nature. Okay, great. Wow. This has been we're gonna have to have you back because I have a bunch of questions, and I hope, and what I'm going to encourage right now is anybody that's watching to ask your questions, and what we'll do, we'll take those questions and we'll share them with you. You gave the phone number. You want to get that phone number one more time? 757.
It is 810-6429, and you can get me through email. Allison, Allison .Davidson, and that's DAVIDSON at dss.virginiaspelledout.gov. I hope to hear from you soon.
I want to thank you just for coming today. It reinforced some of the things that we've talked about, just that mindset, but I think it also helped tap a whole different audience and questions, because a lot of the things that you talked about, the adoption, because we were adopted, we don't know the other side of that equation. So I can't thank you enough. Thank you. This was your connect. So
thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely.
No, thank you.
What would be
appreciate it.
your parting words? What would you say?
I would say that every child needs a home. Every child wants permanency, but also they have a past. They have a future, and it's important that we bring the two together.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's powerful.
Drop the mic on that one.
This has been great.
Oh my goodness.
Great.
I don't even want to say anything. We just cut the camera off on that. But so I'm John.
And I'm Lisa.
And we're adopted. And we want to thank you for investing your time today. And again, please, any questions that you have that she brought that just had you thinking, please type your questions in. She gave you the email. She gave you the phone number. Reach out to us. We definitely will have her back again. In addition, if you have any other ideas, or if you yourself are a resource, please reach out to us. This is a platform that is user friendly, which means it will be shaped by you. You have the ability to help us make this the best possible platform that it can be. We are here talking about non-traditional relationships and how all individuals can have a better chance at success. So on that note, thank y'all very much.
Until next time.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the So I'm Adopted podcast. We hope that this was informative and educational. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at So I'm Adopted. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel, So I'm Adopted. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, make the choice to begin your healing journey.